5 in the current course. Okay, we're live too, it looks like.
You might, yeah, we're live. You might want to mute everybody.
Okay.
It's not that way in his webinar unless Carolyn wants to mute herself.
Do I want to? I've never done a webinar before.
Go ahead and mute yourself, Carolyn. We'll have you talk when it's
appropriate.
I can also mute you. I muted you. Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute here. Want to give folks a chance to just get onto the webinar, and then we'll get started. So we're planning to run from 2 to 3:30. This is also being recorded on YouTube so that we can share this out with folks who weren't able to attend today's live session, just to make sure that this information about the LBSW is shared with all of our alum here at CalU. So this is going to be our overview, and we'll get started just in one more minute here. Sorry if you hear any barking dogs in the background. Wish I could minimize that sound effect. Okay, I'm going to get started just to do an introduction. So this is the LBSW Prep Seminar. For those of you who've joined us, licensure for bachelor's level social workers was finally released with all the regulations in August of 2020, which is very exciting for Pennsylvania. We are the 37th state to join bachelor's level licensure. So we're really excited to share with our alum who have a bachelor's of social work how to go about getting this licensure and some tips to prepare themselves for the ASWB exam. So this is going to be the overview of today's session. So welcome, goals for the session, the requirements for the PA LBSW, some test taking strategy, introduction to that content, an introduction to some of the actual test content too. We have 5 sample questions to share with you, a welcome from our MSW program, and then any questions students might have. So I'll stop sharing at that point so that I can engage with the webinar so I can see folks' questions. So just to begin with the welcome, hi, I'm Dr. Ozzie Block. I am the interim chair of what's now called the Department of Health and Human Service Professions. So social work is now joined with counselor education and communication disorders in one department. We are still an autonomous program for bachelor's of social work and master's of social work, but those are the folks that we now are in a department with. So I am the chair of that department, and I am also the Bachelor of Social Work Program Director. Today, here with us today, I also have Dr. Sherry Boyle and Dr. Carolyn Wass. Dr. Boyle, do you want to show your lovely face and say hi, or wasn't sure?
I cannot show my lovely face.
Okay,
we're blocked from doing that, but welcome everybody. I've been going through the list and I see some names I'm familiar with, so welcome.
Okay, and Dr. Boyle is moving into the BSW program director position in the spring. And all of us faculty at CalU are pretty well versed in what it takes to be, the director of bachelor's or master's of social work, programs. And so we sort of share these roles, and Dr. Boyle was previously our bachelor's program director. So she'll be the one, and come January, if we have questions, we'll direct them to her, but I'm of course always happy to answer questions as well. And also let me introduce Dr. Carolyn Wass, who has been our field faculty for many years here in the Bachelor of Social Work program, who currently has, a field practicum class of students, all of whom are attending today's session as well. So Dr. Wass, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Wass, and it's nice to have you at our seminar today. And I will be really glad to hear from everyone about the questions and issues you have related to LBSW. I know it's brand new and maybe kind of scary, but I think that you can master this, you can go through it, and we'll be able to help you get through that process through this seminar and other future ones if we find that they're necessary to help other students as well as alumni in the community. So welcome today.
Thank you, Carolyn. Our other bachelor's program faculty is Dr. Bonnie Lang, who could not be with us this afternoon, but her email and contact information are there as well. And then Dr. Tao Pham I included as well because she's moving into the MSW program director position in January. So just wanted to sort of circle back if MSW is something that folks are interested in as well. Okay, so that's our welcome. So what are we going to do today? I'm glad you asked. We are going to do these things. Describe the requirements for getting your LBSW and PA, explain test taking techniques for standardized testing, explain some content areas for the ASWB bachelor's level exam, connect our BSW alum to our MSW program, and then connect you guys to some more in-depth opportunities to learn more and do more prep for this examination. So I'm going to start direct to the source, which is the PALS website, which is the Pennsylvania Licensure site. So when you go in and you start to go through the process of trying to obtain a bachelor's of social work, this is the checklist that comes up. So this is direct from the state. This is what you must do. So you have to complete an application. And I think, again, timeline is a really important factor to consider when you're looking at when you're going to complete this application. So within 6 months, you shouldn't really do this application too far in advance, because if you do it too far in advance, you'll have to redo it again. And you may have to pay that application fee again too, which is mentioned there. So the state requires you to pay a $75 application fee to apply for the LBSW. So in Pennsylvania, we have 3 levels of licensure for social workers: LBSW, LSW, and LCSW. So the LSW is when you're finished with your master's degree, you take this exam done, or you take it in your last semester done, similar to LBSW. And the clinical license is once you've had the 2 full years of supervised clinical work. So that's the highest level of licensure, and it does denote that you have clinical expertise in the area of social work. So these are some basic, right? So we have an application fee, and then you have to get your clearances, right? So one is child abuse clearance. And I will get a little bit more in depth to some of this at the end, because we do have in social work a lot of folks who come into this field because of life experiences they've had. So some of those folks have backgrounds that do have things that come up on their record, either in child abuse area or in criminal criminal record background area. So there are ways to deal with expungement. I will show you those slides at the very end, but you do have to provide your clearances as a part of applying for this level of licensure. So child abuse as one part of that, and then the criminal history background check. So it's not just the state police record, it is also the FBI record if you lived outside of Pennsylvania in the last 10 years. So that's now pretty much the standard. It's dealing in this 10 years period of living in PA. The next part is the query from the National Practitioner Data Bank. So this is to prove that you haven't been licensed in another state, lost that license, and then tried to come to PA and get licensed. So this is an important piece of, again, centralizing and making sure that across the United States, one does not have a license that has been revoked, say in Ohio, and then they try to come to Pennsylvania and get licensure there. So that's another aspect to this. And then education verification, right? You have to prove you have your degree. So you have to actually forward verification of your education, which is your transcripts. And if you're in your last semester, you may take your exam in that last semester. You have to have a letter from your university saying that you're in your last semester as you're approaching this exam. Or you can wait to do this whole application process until you've completed your and gotten your transcript, and had your final degree conferred. So that's really your decision as to if you're a current student. But if you're a past student, you would just include the information from your transcript, official transcript. It can't be an unofficial transcript. So again, just write that piece too. So like I was saying to you, this education verification really refers more to students who are currently in school rather than those who've completed. So if you've completed, the educational transcripts is the only part that applies to you. And then of course your exam results. So you must pass with a 70% or better. So it's basically the lowest C- is considered a passing score for all of the licensure exams. And that's pretty much true across the United States. I'm not sure if I guess I don't really know. I know that's true in Ohio, that it's also 70%. But I think that's pretty much across the board. So you have to forward your exam results. So the only place to take the ASWB exam in most licensure exams is at what's called Pearson VUE Centers, PEARSON, like the company that's a higher ed company, and then VUE, VUE. And there are Pearson VUE Centers throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. So we can send that information to folks as well. We have a list of all the centers that are closest to CalU, if that is the region you live in. Or as you schedule, you can see what your opportunities are for testing centers as they are, within radius of your home. And so again, a letter of good standing is something that you would need to include if you have a license in another area. So let's say you're a chemical dependency counselor, you would need to be able to show that LOGS, which is a letter of good standing related to that license. So any other licenses you have, you also need to show you're in good standing on those as well as a part of this application process. If you have no other licenses or certificates or permits, this doesn't apply to you. But if you have them, you have to show a letter of good standing. And that's about it for all of that content. Sherry, are you able to, does anybody have any questions in the chat about any of that?
None at this time.
Okay, will you or Carolyn let me know if you see anything in the chat?
Yeah.
Questions? Okay. Thanks. Next part is the test. What's it look like? Oh my goodness. Well, it's a lot of questions and it's all multiple choice, which if you're not a multiple choice person, this is where prep and licensure prep really comes into play. So it's 170 questions. One aspect of this that's been true for a very long time is that 20 of these questions do not count towards your final score, but you don't know which 20 questions it is. So you have to take all 170 questions. And this has been the case with ASWB for since at least 2005. So that's what I can speak to in terms of like for 15 years, they've been doing this same process as they test out new questions and mold and change what the exam looks like. What's really interesting is that because of the way the test is set up, I can't tell you exactly how many you must get right. The range is about 93 to 106 correct answers in order to pass the exam out of 170. And I think some really important, like sage, why you're at this webinar right now, what you're going to get from your CalU professors is that if you don't answer a question, you are 100% getting it wrong, right? Because you didn't answer it. This is not like the SAT or the ACT where answering it wrong can harm you. This is the question where if you really have no clue what the answer to a question is, it's better to guess because a guess is at least 25% going to get you the right answer. So it's important when you think about these test taking strategies that you do your best to narrow those opportunities, like which of those four. It's always a 4-option question. It's A, B, C, D. So if you can narrow from 4 down to 3, well, then you've improved your chances. So every question that needs to be the strategy. I think a really important one that I always have talked to my students about, if any of you have had me in class, I always say this about multiple choice exams. If you have an initial inclination, it is usually correct. But some of us allow our test taking anxiety to overtake us during a test. And so then we erase or change our answer to something else. But all the experts on test taking will tell you that you should go with your first instinct. So our other recommendation is to take as many practice tests as you can. Practice tests are available from a number of different organizations. ASWB has practice tests available. We're going to show you some questions from a practice test. Current students can access some of a free practice test from the library. But I do think there are some other test taking tips we can give you related to core content. So to sort of remind you, the ASWB bachelor's level exam is generalist in nature. So none of these questions are really deeply clinical. They reflect back on values, ethics, and theory related to social work practice. So for folks who study taking this test, they have a couple of different like mnemonic, acronymy kind of things that they want you to memorize and like write down on a piece of paper as soon as you get in that room to remember to kind of go through this order of operations as you approach answering any of these questions. So one person who wrote about this that I was reading some of their literature this week talked about this as being the social work order of operations. I think that's kind of fun because you think about the math order of operations or, parentheses, multiplication, division, all that good stuff. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, that whole thing that you learned a very long time ago, I'm sure, in maybe middle school or high school. So this one, I don't know how you'd say it, verify, but kind of like verify, but let's not spell it that way, but let's call it verify. So the top thing, feelings of the client to be acknowledged above all, build rapport. That's RAPT, stands for rapport. So that's the top first operation. Like if you have a question and you're like, what's happening here? I don't know. There's so many good answers. Feelings of the client to be acknowledged above all. The next thing would be assess. And assessing that client either formally or informally. Think back to your own social work education. In bachelor's level social work, assessment is the first step in the competencies. There's assess, evaluating, assessing, intervening, right? And the very first thing that you do is assess. And so assessment is the next layer. The next one would be to refer, right? Because if it's outside of your area of competence, remember, you refer. Educating clients as the next layer. So again, like thinking about psychoeducation or providing clients with information, books, like bibliotherapy, all kinds of information that you can provide a client to learn more about the issue that they're facing. Advocacy as a central part, again, of the social work profession, thinking about ways you can advocate for a client, either through policy change, through programs that they could qualify for. Think about like WIC or SNAP benefits, right? The advocacy is a piece. And then the next part is facilitating. So always remembering that one of the, again, core tenets of a generalist education or a bachelor's social work education is this idea that we facilitate and we don't do for our clients. Because, that the Chinese proverb talks about, if you teach a person to fish, they'll fish for the rest of their lives. But if you go ahead and hand them a fish, they're going to eat for that one day. I've kind of given you my own version of that. But I mean, if you solve your clients' problems for them, they will never learn to do that for themselves. It doesn't empower them. It actually makes them dependent on you as a social worker. So I think that facilitation idea really speaks to the notion that we have to help walk the path with our client. Maybe we're giving them advice along that way on like how to access a benefit or how to do something. But if we do it for them, it doesn't allow them to do it for themselves. And then finally intervening, actually connecting with, right, the actual work as the kind of like, that's not the first thing you do. So that's a really important part of answering these questions, because honestly, Director Boyle and I went through a lot of these sample questions, and you have to have a strategy as you approach them, because so many of the answers sound right, because they might be different things you do at different points in time. Dr. Boyle, I see you've unmuted.
Yes. So there is a question, and I think you just answered it. Is this in order? So is this in?
Yes, it is. That's the order. Start with feelings. The last thing you should be doing is the intervention. Yes, this is the order of operations. First through last. Verify. That's how I'm saying it. I don't know how the person who came up with it said it, because I didn't talk to them. I read it. So I'm saying it's verify. Any other questions about any of this one? Because there's another one. You thought there was just one you had to memorize, but there's two. And the next one deals with the headache you shall have after you take this exam. And it's aspirins, which again, kind of my favorite, that they're both like verify, and aspirins. I mean, for me, I have to make them fun like that to remember them meaningfully. And I hope that maybe the way we're approaching this training today will help you to remember them too. So there are a lot of questions that ask about what's the best option in the ASWB exams, no matter what level they're at, bachelor's, master's, clinical. So this one, and you have to remember that aspirin has a double A, so that you first acknowledging that patient, which I prefer to say client, but the person who wrote this said patient in their stuff, so I wanted to keep their word there too. But you acknowledge the client and you begin building rapport, right? Similar to what we just talked about here. Oops, sorry. The idea that we're building rapport first. So it's a same first step for both of these acronyms. Then you assess. Then the mantra that we tried to, if you had us as professors, me, Dr. Boyle, Dr. Was, we said to you 10 million times, start where the client is. We have to begin. We cannot bring people, somebody who's, just stopped using for the first time in, their lifetime. you might be ready for them to be at a different place in terms of their recovery than they are actually at. And so it's understanding that we always meet clients where they're at, no matter how, what our desire is for them for the long term. Meeting a client where they're at is key to ensuring that you're really bringing social work practice to them and not some other discipline's perspective on fixing people, right? So again, starting where client is. Next one is about protecting life. So there's a lot of questions that get at this idea of like autonomy and other stuff like that. And so the people who take this test, the next line after you AAS is to protect life. I thought another really interesting one was about intoxication. So there might be questions in there that try to trip you up about somebody who is actively in use. This isn't about somebody who is sober and, had a history of drug or alcohol use. This is literally a person who's in your session who is currently intoxicated. And so the perspective on this is you cannot do work with them at that moment in time. And I think that's a pretty well shared perspective on that you couldn't intervene with that person at that moment in time. You might like go get them a sandwich, sit with them to get some coffee. You're going to help to get them to a place where they're able to actually engage in meaningful conversation that will get somewhere. But if the person's not fully in their, mind's capacity because they're intoxicated, you can't really intervene with them with social work interventions. Important to remember. Next one is ruling out any medical issues. So again, this is thinking about folks in terms of multiple level issues, diabetes, hypertension, other things that could be going on. So you want to rule out other medical things as being perhaps related to a problem that that person is facing in terms of your work with them in that moment, in that clinical scenario that's presented, right? What's the best option? This slide, these questions refer to when you get to a question that is what's the best option here. Remembering always these last two as well, the non-judgmental stance. So again, one of the hardest things about social work, I guess, is that we really do have to abide by this in terms of the code of ethics. And I think we come from a culture that is extremely judgmental. So I think we're often trying to strike a balance between what the culture says and what our profession says. And it's really important on this exam that you are in alignment with the profession. If you align with culture, you will, our American culture or whatever in the United States of America, you will fail these kind of questions. So you have to align to the non-judgmental stance. And then finally, self-determination. Again, a core tenet from the NASW Code of Ethics, the notion that people have the right to make these decisions about their own life. So again, it's the same hierarchical list. So thinking about each of these kinds of things. So let me also just make this statement. This one is really the order of operations. You go from feelings to intervention.
Dr. Block,
Yes.
on that, go back, please. There was a question, why is refer so early in the order here?
Yes, it's a great question. I think it's often so early because the nature of the questions, if there's an option answer that says to refer out, it's indicative that it's a specialized area. And so if it's outside of generalist social worker expertise, you would refer out before trying to tackle that yourself.
Yes, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
And in your assessment, you would be able to identify
You would
that.
know that, exactly. Right. Great question. And I want to make clear here, this stack is not the same as the order of operations. So this one is like you do for F before you do I, but this list is much more like, look at all of these things. This one is not hierarchically organized, but these are all things you need to consider when the question asks, which is the best option given this scenario? Which option would you choose? Like, it's a question that's worded like that. We'll see actually if any of our sample ones, I didn't actually align that to our sample questions. If any of our sample questions gets at this, so you can kind of see that working itself out. So this one is order of operations, and this one is things to think about. Okay. And then we have the questions here. So are there any other things about this order of operations stuff? This one, order of operations, social work, order of operations, or the aspirins you need to take after you take the exam or during the exam?
No written questions at this time.
Okay. All right, so now we have some questions themselves. So I added 5 questions in here to kind of give folks a flavor for what the questions look like on the ASWB exam. These are actual questions from a past ASWB exam. Let me make a few things clear. All bachelor's level social workers throughout the United States take the same test. So yes, you apply for licensure in Pennsylvania, but if you took the ASWB exam and you took it in Ohio, it was the same test you'd take in PA because they're all proctored and created by the Association of Social Work Boards, which creates one exam at the bachelor's level for bachelor's level social work. So to be clear, same test no matter where you go to take it, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, wherever you live, it doesn't matter, it's the same test. So I think what's really important about these questions is a little bit of test taking prep. Some folks like to rush to the answers, and you cannot take this test that way. You must read the question in its entirety, read all of the answer choices. Even if you think you found the best one first, you might be wrong, because here's what's crazy about this test. Often a couple of the answers sound right. And it's not that they're trying to trick you, it's really that they are trying to get you to go back to that verify and aspirins piece to make sure you're abiding by the expectations of a generalist social worker. So I'm going to read these out loud. It would have been fun for me to like stick a survey in here or whatever, but whatever. I've not done that. So we're gonna, if folks want to answer before I get to the next slide. A client who has recently retired tells a social worker that his life has always been consumed by his job. He was focused on rising to the top of his industry and increasing his earnings. The client feels that he would now like to make a difference by giving back and would like to donate his time and money to helping others. The client is most likely, okay, and here are our answer choices: progressing through a typical psychosocial stage of development. B, worried about having something productive to do now that he is retired. C, wanting to teach others how to be successful in their chosen fields. Or D, experiencing a loss in role functioning that often accompanies retirement. So I wonder if Dr. Boyle, it's kind of fun for us, or Dr. Wass, to like talk through some of this. So what would be your dead giveaway, like that's for sure the wrong? No way is that the right answer. Or I guess I should say, what are your thoughts about psychosocial stages, or what does that make you think of? What theory is pulled up?
Erickson.
Erickson.
Right. So the psychosocial stages, again, theory to go back to, Erickson was a psychologist. So most of the theory that we pull in social work is not social workers that created it. It's psychologists, psychiatrists, other people from other disciplines, before social work was really a profession. So Erickson's stage of like generativity versus stagnation, right? Or like despair. What's the other term? Despair and what's the other?
Integrity.
Integrity versus despair, right? It's like, is this person at that apex of time in Erickson's 8 psychosocial stages? So that's a question. You'd need to think about that a little bit. Worried about having something productive to do now that he is retired. Does that feel like a right answer?
Not from a social work perspective.
Right. So I think like you
General.
could, right. I think you could definitely like mark away B as being wrong. And I think then you're left with A, C, and D. And you really have to think about wanting to teach others how to be successful in their chosen fields.
Yeah.
I mean, he talked about giving his time and money, right? So
Right.
again, I think B and C are kind of both out. And then you're left with A and D. So is it that he's going through this typical stage, the client is most likely, or is this client experiencing a loss in role functioning that accompanies retirement? And see, there's the like trick of it. The answer is A. And I feel like when I look at some of these questions, A and D both look like pretty decent answers.
Right.
Yeah,
But I think the reason D is wrong is because there's not a loss necessarily, right? We're not talking about this person's depressed. We're not talking about, he's talking about a pretty typical experience that most people have when they move from workforce into retirement. And so I think it harkens into the notion of those stages. And then can you apply that stage appropriately? Sherry, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I thought that was right. And I think if you go back to your,
Mm.
uh,
My order of operations?
yeah, that the assessment would be first, right?
Yes.
And I feel that's where you are with this case.
Yeah,
You don't have all the information yet.
agreed. Totally. Thanks for bringing in the order of operations there, Dr. Boyle. So the client's in middle adulthood and is faced with the challenge of understanding himself as part of society. During that time, adults strive to nurture things, blah, blah, blah. According to Eric Erickson, contributing to society and doing things to benefit future generations are important needs of generativity versus stagnation, which, we just kind of alluded to. So making your mark on the world, caring for others, etc. So again, the insight from ASWB is the question begins with several sentences about the client's past and current life experiences, including a desire to give back. Material in quotation marks deserve particular attention and usually relate to the answer. So remember that. And then this qualifying word, most. So I think, again, it underscores that to successfully take these tests and to get the pass rate, you need to think about test taking strategies, dive yourself deeper back into some theoretical stuff, especially like Piaget, Erickson, really basic ones that will come up in these tests again, because they love to make sure you really remember those theoretical hierarchies and how they would layer into the life of a client. All right, next one. A social worker is asked to evaluate the effectiveness of a behavioral program aimed at increasing social skills of children. While collecting baseline data, she asks a colleague to independently record the number of social interactions observed prior to the start of the program. The colleague's information is then compared to that obtained by the social worker. This approach is most, look at your most there, likely used by the social worker due to concerns about A, validity of the research being conducted, B, response bias due to social desirability, C, reliability of the observations being made, or D, homogeneity of the sample. Okay, so again, if we want to talk this out a little bit, Dr. Wass, is there anyone here that's a dead giveaway of being not the right answer in your opinion?
For me, it's D.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Homogeneity of the sample doesn't seem to relate to anything.
Any of the
It's
information
one.
given?
It's a single subject.
Right. Yeah, it's an SSRD for sure. But the focus is what are they attempting to determine? They're collecting the baseline data to ask a colleague to independently record. That's inter-rater reliability.
Sure, it is inter-rater reliability.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So if it's inter-rater reliability,
It should be C.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure down through all these.
it is C. But I think it underscores, Dr. Wass, that if you remember the things from your basic research course, and you remember a concept and you look at what they're doing, the answer is if the answer is there, right? They're not saying inter-rater reliability, they're saying reliability of observations being made. That is the crux of that question as a two-part piece, because it's doing it twice, right? Which is
Right.
not, again, really related to A, B, or D. So let's look at they call it inter-observer reliability. Same diff, in my opinion.
My textbook is a little different wording.
I always learned inter-rater reliability too. I think it's potato kind of thing. Yeah. So reliability is related to the consistency of data. When using observers to collect information, there's always a concern about whether results are reliable or consistent. So this also requires you to remember the difference between reliability and validity. Mm-hmm. And I know Dr. Wass, from our conversation briefly yesterday, that was a content area you guys just talked about in research class. But yes. I think it is important that you know those basic terms again. So it's coming back to your education. Do you remember what it means to be reliable, right? That the same assessment done over and over again will get the same results. That's what reliability is. And validity is, does it actually measure what it says it's measuring? Like if I stand on a scale, is it actually measuring my weight? That's important. So there are other types of reliability testing: test, retest, parallel forms, interconsistency reliability, et cetera. So again, what does it say here? It talks about this idea of most While all the response choices contain research terms, the use of independent observers relates to concerns with consistency or reliability. All right, let's look at the next one. Which of the following is not an assumption? So I hate not questions. I'm just gonna put that out there. But I mean, I think there's a lot of them on the ASWB exam. So sometimes you have to like do a little practice with your mind when you start seeing not questions. So which of the following is not an assumption of age stage developmental theorists? A, development is discontinuous with qualitatively different capacities emerging in each stage. B, stages are related to age. C, stages occur in specific order with each stage building on capacities developed in the previous stage. Or D, development in early childhood has an impact on development later in life. So I'll tell you what two I know are true, right? So they would fall out of this not thing, and they are not the answer to this question. Both B and C. Because stages are related to age, if we're talking about age stage developmental theorists, right? I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like they wrote it in it's almost like they gave you a dead giveaway there, right? And then C, stages occur in a specific order with each stage building on something from the previous stage, which again is a kind of a hallmark of age stage. So then you're kind of left with A and D as which is not an assumption. So an idea of a discontinuity with different things happening and capacities emerging at every age. Or D, development in early childhood has an impact on development later in life. And I think that's the key to why the answer is not A. So D is the one that is not true. And it's that those development being used twice there that really makes it. And again, this is why I'm talking about that sometimes these questions are very tricky. Or at least I perceive them to be tricky as a person who, you know, is fairly well versed in the content and curriculum of bachelor's level education. And here's why. Okay, so the question contains a qualifying word, not, which requires social workers to select the response choice, which is not a tenet of age stage developmental theorists. While not is used as a qualifying word, it is often helpful to remove it from the question. So the same test taking strategy I just talked to you about, and eliminate the three responses that are essential. The approach will leave the one that's not true. So then the top part talks about development is a series of age-related changes. So of course, there's Freudian stuff, Erikson, Piaget, Kohlberg, and, you know, Kohlberg's all the moral reasoning stuff. So the other ones are much more like about development in childhood and related to psychological development, much more so, or like, and also like, you know, the thumb sucking and using the potty and all that stuff is very Freudian with like the latent phallic, all that good stuff, like why children like to breastfeed and suck their thumb, if you will. And so a stage is a period of time in development in which people exhibit typical behavior patterns and establish typical capacities. So developmental theorists view these as, you know, occur in a sequential order. And so they don't see this as like that's related to that necessarily. Tricky. All right, number 4. Oof, a little shorter of one, but I'm not sure shorter is always better in terms of the question. A process during which a conditioned response. So this gets back into some Pavlovian stuff. So another one you kind of have to like reconnect into, right? Ivan Pavlov and his whole unconditioned, conditioned responses with the dog food. Remember, you learned that probably in Psych 100. It's also talked about a little bit in some of your other courses. I did a little bit on in families, and I know there's, you know, content that sparsely connects back into this because that behavioral stuff, those that concept is often utilized in behavioral technique that's used with children and adults. Okay, so a process during which a conditioned response gradually stops due to the withholding of a reinforcer is known as. So what are some dead giveaways that are not the right answer just from reading the question and like what it says?
Well, you're
A, exactly, aversion therapy.
no, that's not gonna be an option.
Exactly. Any others? What do you know about it? What do you know about the term extinction? What does it mean? I mean, and if it doesn't ring true to you from your social work experience, what still would that term mean to you if you think about it in other realms of your
No
life?
longer exist.
No
Something
longer
that
exists.
ends.
Dodo bird, dinosaurs, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
So I say that because I think sometimes you have to go into other
Mhm.
information in your mind if you can't figure something out from other information. So let me tell you something interesting about reinforcement that I always find challenging when I explain these concepts to students. There are very few negative reinforcers. I can think of two examples that still exist in our culture: alarm clocks and the beeping you hear when you don't put on your seatbelt. Reinforce means you want the behavior to happen again. So a negative reinforcer is something aversive, something you don't like a beeping alarm. That's like really the only one I'm ever able to come up with for folks for a real-time example that we all engage in to some extent or another. I haven't used an alarm clock for a while now. I just like wake up real early every day and to say, and then some wish I had a negative reinforcer in my life because then I could maybe sleep in sometimes. But whatever. Point being, loud alarm, you want to turn it off, right? So you wake up and you turn it off. So I guess like if I'm giving you a mini tutorial on a concept, it's important to remember that reinforcers reinforce a positive behavior, and waking up is positive. Wearing your seatbelt is positive. So that negative reinforcement, that beeping, stopping it is what is referring to that negative reinforcement piece.
I might be able to add another one.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I love it. Go for it, Dr. Voss.
Hitting your thumb with a hammer when you're
Mhm.
building something. Do you think that would be negative reinforcement?
I guess if you keep doing it over and over, I don't know, would you not get the shed built or whatever? I'm not sure. Maybe. I think it would depend on what the end result was. If you stopped doing, like, did you stop pounding your thumb? If you just kept pounding your thumb over and over again, like 30 times, maybe not.
I've done it. That's what made me think of it.
Yeah. I think I guess I always go to the alarm clock because I think it's one most people deal in on a daily basis, and I think it's like, but I'm all in on your nailing or pounding your thumb representation too, Dr. Watts.
Well, at least I added
So
levity.
extinction, right? It's extinction. Just remember, like dinosaurs, yeah, brings 100%. So you want something to disappear, you want it to stop. That thinking about extinction as a part of that. Okay, and the last example question I have for everybody, which of the following service provisions is based on a residual approach to social welfare? I may call on Dr. Boyle a bit to talk a little from an expertise perspective on what a residual approach refers to. I'm sure they discuss it in the question in a little bit more depth.
Residual, I believe, is everybody is
A part of it.
yeah, receives.
So there's some of these that then that's a pretty, does everybody get SNAP?
Nope,
Does everybody get Social Security?
No.
not at a certain time.
Right. So then it would come down to public education and law enforcement. And I guess here's where my thinking would be. If it was me, I'd be like, ooh, but like everybody can qualify for public education, but we all receive support from law enforcement, right?
Right.
B is the answer. B.
What was B?
SNAP. Supplemental nutrition assistance. I'll watch out for the experts here. Residual welfare is essentially seen as being in place purely for those who are poorer in society,
Oh, so either
providing a safety net. So residual refers to reactive or gap filling. It only provides assistance when other efforts and measures concerning natural resources have been depleted. So again, requires you to have, go ahead, Dr. Boyle.
I gave you the wrong answer.
But that's okay because we had the right answer right there. And that actually is a teachable moment, I think. I think it's good that it says supplemental nutrition assistance instead of food stamps. I think at least we've updated the test on that regard. But I do think it requires you have to really have a depth understanding of what residual approach refers to, which is, I guess, this gap. And it's interesting though, because in some ways, public education I don't know if you look at like contemporary arguments about public education, I'd still be a little bit waffly myself on like, would it be A or B? But clearly, supplemental nutrition assistance is from something that's for individuals who have a certain income requirement, right? Public education is for all,
Correct.
but SNAP is an income-based requirement. So, and then that piece here talking about SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, and how one connects into that program. So, ooh, I have a raised hand, EXA. How do we deal with raised hands? Ooh. Can I unmute people? What do? I have to like stop share? I guess I'm gonna stop share and see if I can, how do I can see people. Ooh, attendees and a raised hand. It will, oh, I'm gonna allow EXA to talk. Let's see what happens. Go ahead, EXA, you can talk.
They need to unmute themselves, I
Oh,
think.
I'm unmuting too.
Oh, okay.
Well, I unmuted, but it went back to mute.
Maybe they are
I'm
unmuted.
gonna allow
Ozzy.
EXA to talk. Let's see what happens. Go ahead.
That's CJ.
Yeah,
that was
here's
me.
CJ.
Yeah, I
They
was
need
just
to
gonna let
unmute
you know, you
themselves,
need
I
to
think.
I'm unmuting.
allow them
Oh,
to the permission to unmute.
Well, I
So.
unmuted, but it went.
There's
back
a little button.
I have to
Maybe they are
permission to
unmuted.
unmute.
Ozzy.
It says disable talking. I'm clicking unmute, but
That's CJ.
Yeah, here's CJ.
Yeah, I was just gonna let you know, you need to allow
Will you
them
mute
to the
your
permission to
phone?
unmute. So.
I
Or
unmuted them.
if
but
they
it's
could
not-
type it in the question and answer.
Yeah, sorry, EXA. I'm trying to unmute you, but it's not seeming to work. Could you
So-
type your question into the Q&A?
Dr. Block, while we've got this break,
Yes.
there's a question related just about licensure in general.
Yes.
I received my BSW degree in 1981 from CalU and have been in the field for at least 30 years. Am I still eligible to take this test?
Yes, you are. There's no expiration on when you got your BSW. So yes, as long as you just have to get your transcript. So an official transcript will allow you to take the test. There is no, because it's new and because people do have bachelor's degrees from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it is 100% open to anybody with a bachelor's level. The 6 months thing is really key because it's about the application process. So make sure that when you start the application that you process it within 6 months, but there's no, to date, there's no, you have to have had your BSW in the last 5 years, 10 years, any of that kind of stuff. I actually think that's true for master's level licensure as well. I think that the only place where we have time limits is on advanced standing in a master's degree program if you had a bachelor's degree, right? So if you have a bachelor's degree from 30 years ago, you wouldn't qualify for the advanced standing piece because it's been so long since you were in school and many competencies have changed in terms of that master's level curriculum. But know that you can have your bachelor's degree from 50 years ago, frankly, 100 years ago.
Also, you might want to let people know if they have to leave that it will be on YouTube.
Yes, that's also true. If anybody has to go at any point in time, that is 100% true. We are on the tube of views. I'm gonna, I'm being very silly. I'm gonna share my screen again because I wasn't quite done with everything, but I think we were done with that question. So let me do the whole view show thing, slideshow, slide. We were going to take a minute to have Dr. Boyle talk a little bit about the MSW program because we realized there might be some students here who have thought about getting their MSW in the past, and this would be a great opportunity for us to just let them know a couple of things about the MSW program. So Dr. Boyle, I'll mute myself.
So we do have an MSW program at CalU. We are an advanced generalist program. So when you graduate with your MSW from CalU, you will have the skills, knowledge, and tools to work with individuals, groups and families, communities, and organizations. We do not have different tracks that you would take. And that is due to when we started our program 20 years ago, the services and agencies in this area felt they needed somebody who could do a little bit of everything. And so that's why we have this approach. As a result, our students and our graduates are working everywhere from clinical work to macro policy. So it doesn't limit you in any way. We have a regular accelerated program. So for those of you who have been out, who have a BSW and have been out for more than 5 years, you can do that, be done in 2 academic years. And we also have a part-time regular standing, and we have advanced standing. So if you have your BSW and it's still within 5 years, you could do the advanced standing. If you do advanced standing, you can be done in 3 semesters. Our program is now a blended approach. So students come to class once every 3 weeks. You have face-to-face class, and then the weeks in between that, you do online reading, quizzes, discussion boards. We have found that the majority of our students have to work full-time and have other obligations, and this has been a nice way for them to balance all of their responsibilities. We also are now offering at CalU a MSW MBA dual degree. So those of you who are in supervisory roles or director positions, this is a nice opportunity for you as well. And the MBA degree is fully online. And these again are just our 2 different approaches. Just remember, for the regular program, you would do 2 practicums. One is your foundation practicum, 1 semester, averages 16 hours a week. And then your final year, you do another advanced practicum, 1 agency, 2 semesters. It averages 24 hours per week. And if you are working full-time, I strongly recommend a part-time course load. And again, here is our advanced standing requirements and how long it would take. And while we recommend you start in the summer or in the fall, if you apply and want to start in the spring or summer, I can work with you on creating a schedule that works for you. And this is just more information on our blended program.
Beautiful flyers that we've
Yes.
had made.
To add some color.
Some colors, some pizzazzers. Okay, then I had this that I was going to actually put into the chat for folks to fill out, because I want to know if people are interested in doing a more in-depth course with lots of prep. So I'm going to stop my share of that and put it into the chat. Q&A. Can it go into Q&A? Maybe. Let's see. I'm going to answer live with my, that's not what I'm doing. I'm typing an answer. Sort of love. Okay, I'm putting the, okay. Everybody's, do I have, I wonder how hey CJ, how do I put something in the chat? I just have Q&A that I can really answer. So like
You might not have a chat.
yeah, I might not have a chat
It's a
function.
webinar.
No chat function.
Can we email it to them? We might be able to email them. I don't know.
Could email them. Yes, I mean, I'll get all of their names and emails from the data.
So
So I'll send everybody.
Yeah,
Go
the
ahead.
chat was disabled on the setup. So
That's okay, CJ. So
I can attempt to.
Email it to them? We might be able to email them. I don't know.
where you're getting that feedback.
Yes,
CJ.
I mean, I'll get all of their names and emails from the data.
I'm muting CJ because it's all that feedback. I think that CJ, I think I can pull from who attended today the email list, so I can just send everybody my survey. So I'll just plan to do that. So I'll go back to my share screen. So that was a little survey that I had for everybody that was just really to better understand who might need more prep than, because this is a very like basic kind of thing. Oh yeah, so Keenan, how do I talk to you? Oh, Keenan, okay, let's try. Oh, Dr. Block with your webinar skills. Not good. Let's see if I can do it. Okay, your hand's up. Keenan, I'm allowing you to talk. Try talking, Keenan.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
I was asking, how does that MBA dual work with being on advanced standing, being the advanced standing is as a shorter semester scenario?
It's a great question, Dr. Boyle.
So that's a great question, Keenan. The way that we have been working it right now is most of the students finish the MSW and then take the MBA because it's just too much to do together. But you might be able to take some summer courses or winter courses together with the MSW if you're doing advanced.
Yes, I want to do advanced and I want to start in the spring.
Okay, then what I do is I work with the students individually to come up with a schedule. Because unlike BSW, all of our courses are not offered every semester. we can only offer one. We're in a sequence, and that's the sequence you have to follow. But I can work with students to start anytime they want.
Okay.
And so I think
And-
too, Keenan, the other part of this is that the way it works with the MSW MBA is that your elective courses like count towards each other's, and that's how it
Right.
becomes a like
Yeah.
blended, and it's not as long a program. Is that
Okay.
you take your MSW electives and they go to the MBA, and the MBA stuff goes to your MSW. That's how it works at all universities.
That's
It's super cool, and you can keep on being at Cal U, Keenan. So also pretty cool. Anybody? Any other? Any other questions related to our, looks like Sherry answered a bunch of questions. Oh, when EXA didn't mean to have a question. Okay, at least I didn't miss a question. I learned that from reading all those things. The only other thing I wanted to make sure I shared from the presentation, which I'll share one more time, was like contact information for us and the department. So, you know, right now we're all working remotely because of COVID-19, but, you know, I put up all of our emails before, but if you have email, if you want to email somebody, I'm happy to be the central contact person and like refer things out. If you have questions specifically about MSW, I can connect you with Dr. Boyle, but my email is block@calu.edu. I did create some other like links here, and I mentioned earlier expungement. Our field director, Ann Bergamasco, has done a lot of work better understanding the expungement process that's recently been updated in Pennsylvania. So these are the links from a recent presentation that dealt in expungement. So again, all of this, the live recording of this will be on YouTube. We'll send that out. We'll also send out these PowerPoints to any of our student, you know, anyone who's attended today's session for you to share out. I'll send them as a PDF so that it can connect because a PowerPoint's often too big of a file to send. And then the resource list. So just some other information from ASWB I thought was really salient. They have a candidate handbook that's very nice and like a good thing to read through if you're considering taking the bachelor's level exam to better understand how they would delineate that process and how to go through all of it from their perspective. And then I, in particular, connected the PA registration site for this state board of, it's like a lot of different names, but includes social workers, like family marriage therapists, you know, that whole crew. The direct link to that as well. So I love for the remaining time. And then I also, oh yeah, I also put in this link that was like test taking strategy stuff. And that was all my stuff that I share with you, the Verify and the aspirin. And I mean, there's a lot of other test taking strategy that deals in like how to prepare yourself on test day, good night's sleep, well, like not only rested, but like arriving early to the testing site so you're not anxious. So you feel calm and centered. Drinking a lot of water. They talk a lot about like electrolytes and like the balance one needs to really be able to like capably answer all these multiple choice questions. Wearing something really comfortable again, so that you're not like feeling stiff and right. So like thinking about comfortability, and it's really important that you understand as you approach these Pearson View centers, because they're at lower capacity right now because of COVID-19, understanding what's expected of you in that testing center. So making sure you have a mask you really like that's comfortable for you to wear. And again, that it's not going to bother you during that time taking the test. Maybe a water bottle with like a straw so you can get it like under your mask. There's a lot of like little things I think that you can think through that will bring you creature comfort during taking that, you know, the time that you're taking that test. And I think if you can prepare yourself with those things, you're also better off on testing day. Any other? I'll
Yeah.
stop share now, but
There's another question. If you're going directly to the MSW, should you take the LBSW? No.
oh, such a good question. I think if you're going directly to the MSW, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But I think if you are planning to work for some period of time, the answer is yes. And I think that really comes down to a couple of things. One, if you're going straight into MSW and your BSW, you're going to be done in 3 semesters. So presumably, you know, you're going to be taking that master's level exam. And one thing that they have changed in some other states that they haven't done here yet, but they could do here, which is why we have to keep on top of these regs as they come out, is they've made it that if you were going to get the master's level licensure, but you had opportunity for bachelor's level, in some states, they're now making you take the bachelor's level. So that's important too. It used to be back in the day in PA, you could just take the LCSW exam. You didn't have to take the LSW exam. You could just go straight, sit for the LCSW exam, get your 2 years done, and then just have your LCSW. And in the interim, you had this LSW, right? Because you didn't have those clinical hours and they allowed you to sit for the more complicated exam. But they did away with that. And I'm sure it's both a money thing and a process thing. But now you must take the LSW exam and then take the LCSW exam. So those are like perfunctory changes that are important to understand. And I could see them eventually changing this one too and making it that you had to take the LBSW to take the LSW, right? But for the moment, it is not that way. But as you approach any of these things, you'll need to be aware of that these kind of things are always evolving and changing. And some of it is just to make as much money as they can.
If I remember this LSW right, there was a time limit.
There is a time limit. No, I'm not sure if they list that on the site actually, because I do think it can be variable depending on if you've like OSD accommodation and stuff like that. I feel like, let me see if I can look it up and find it.
I was just curious because when I took my LSW, it was way back when they first developed it in this state, and I thought it was 2 hours.
I do think you're right, Carolyn, that it is timed. So I'm going to see if I can.
And that's a consideration when taking the test, knowing how long you have, and also being able to have a device to tell you the time, because I'm not sure they're going to allow you to have your phone.
Oh, I agree with that. That's very true.
Because of possible issues of cheating. And not that anyone would think to, but you never know.
So the online thing talks about from ASWB that you get 4 hours to take one practice test. Now that's for a practice test. I'm looking to see what it says. I wonder.
That's a lot longer than I remember the LSW to be. I know it wasn't 4 hours.
I thought we had 3, but you finished it sooner than that.
I thought you're right too, Sherry. 3.
I'm looking for it right now, but it's not on the ASWB. It would be on the ASWB site.
I can try to look it up while you, we have another question. How do you think this will affect job requirements? I noticed my company now asks for the LBSW. Do you think the LBSW will now take precedence over BSW?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to answer it more complexly than that, though. I think this all came to pass. We've been waiting on these regulations for LBSW for 8 years. And I'm going to be really honest here. I think that the reason this happened now is because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So many people are getting telehealth services. And we have for too long had people who have bachelor's degrees in history and other humanities serving in roles as case managers in other places where it should really be somebody with a social work degree. And so I believe that the quality of that care and the information that was coming back to state regulators pushed them to finally finalize this so that we can get moving on having competent bachelor's level social workers licensed and getting preferred status in these kinds of jobs. I also think they realize that there's much more need for people to just be LBSW and for not every single person to be vying to get an MSW. So I think that it was a multi-factorial decision-making process, but I can promise you that what's going to start happening on jobs is they're going to start saying LBSW preferred, and then pretty soon after, like give it a year, maybe 2, it'll start saying LBSW required. So that will be what the turn is for social service agencies with bachelor's level jobs. And I think it's actually a really positive one. I just think there will be, like any change, some pushback from folks who don't have that degree who've been working there a long time.
From teaching policy, I can tell you that there is a time window that I believe LBSW was up against. That is when you pass legislation, you have a period of time to implement it, and tends to be sometimes like 5 years. We were right up against the 5-year window. And if you don't implement in that window, you then lose that legislation.
Yeah.
You have to go back and be repassed. So I think that's another reason that we got it now, is because they were right up against that 5-year deadline.
Yeah. So Vicky says, amen to that. I agree.
It looks like it is 4 hours, Dr. Block.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's what I saw there. I wonder if it's because it's a bachelor's level exam that they give it longer.
Maybe. But it does look like it's 4.
So 4 hours for bachelor's. I do agree with you both that the master's one is shorter. And then I wanted to speak to Keenan, talked about this going direct to MSW would make LBSW irrelevant. And I think as long as you really do fulfill that and go straight into MSW, yes, I don't think you should at this point in time bother with taking the licensure for bachelor's level social worker exam. But I do think the preparation, because like I told you in Ohio, when I worked at Youngstown State, they had to take it to get the master's one because that regulation had been there for over 20 years. So I'm promising you that eventually that will happen here, but not yet. So we're not there yet, but that is the future of this. The future of this will be LBSW to get LSW and, so on and so forth. Are there any
Are
other-
you emailing the PowerPoint to people?
Yes, we'll send I'm going to send it as a PDF, Sherry, because the PowerPoint will be too big, but I'll send all the content with all those links and everything to everybody who's been here today, because they shall come up in the attendance information with their email and everything. That CJ can pull that out of the webinar and send that to me. So then I can share that with everybody. Oh, and my answer is, I have this, and I want to share my that survey with everybody too. So I'm going to send them the survey to see who might be interested in a more in-depth webinar. And then I do want to make sure everybody has this content for themselves. So
I would suggest a couple of things for people who are going to take this. From reading the questions, I noticed that you seem to have a good grasp of the social work or social welfare vocabulary. So
yes.
if you don't, and if you're confused about it, you need to actually create or find a book that has the social welfare vocabulary in it so that you can actually read the question adequately and understand what they're asking you.
Yeah.
And that relates back to some of us who are old timers, because I have a bachelor's from 1981. And yes, some of the content at that time is going to be very different from what it is today. They there's a lot of the same stuff, but I mean, some of the theory wasn't hit as heavily, perhaps.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I would suggest that if you're an older timer person, no offense to anybody, because I'm one of you, you go back and try and find a book of current theories or this practice book more recently written than 1980.
I also want to mention, Carolyn, that we from LEAP, which is an education provider that does prep for all the social work licensure exams, they are offering to our alumni 10% off of their course study materials. So I can send out that information as well.
Great.
Send out the PDF to everybody so that is an opportunity for alum especially. And current students can get a different rate that we can also send to them. I think it's like 15% off since they're currently a student. So we can share that as well, Dr. Wass, for your students who are currently enrolled in the field practicum seminar.
Okay, that was good. I did check the testing centers. There's not too many of them. I couldn't find one in Pittsburgh, which I found strange.
Well, I sent you that PDF of all the sites, right? The Pearson View sites. I can show that to everybody too.
I found Washington, Morgantown, and someplace in Ohio, and I'm thinking I must be missing something.
I went on their website. Yeah, here it is.
I probably misread something or missed it, but I thought that would be unusual.
Here, I'm going to show this screen. So I had to contact ASWB because you have to be a student to see where these test taking centers are. So here are the ones nearest to CalU. There's one in Washington, PA.
Oh, there we are in Pittsburgh.
20.6 miles. Ardmore Boulevard, which is kind of near North Versailles-ish. 25.5 miles from CalU. Here's another Pittsburgh location. So there were, and Morgantown has one.
I just
Akron was the next closest. So there were two. There was one in Washington, and then two that are in Pittsburgh that are nearby. And I do want to just, and we're happy to share that list out to everybody too. But you can get that once you go to register for the test. But please be aware that the wait is several months now. The wait is a 3-month wait, and that is because of COVID and the decreased capacity. I think they're at 50% capacity for these testing centers. And to be clear, they are licensing test centers for all licensure. So counselors, counselor ed, some like teaching praxis stuff. Like there's all kinds of folks who go to these places for these professional licensure exams. So you do need to kind of research a little bit in that site when you go to register to see what the testing center is that's open near you and when it next has slots for an available testing spot. I'm not seeing any other questions on the open. I have a social work dictionary. Keenan, will it suffice? I think the social work dictionary is very helpful. I do think you should probably look at some of the LEAP preparation materials, but I'm going to share some things with Dr. Wass that I hope she can then share with you in class too to help with some of the prep. But I think you want to take as many practice tests as you can if you're intending to take the LBSW practice exam or any practice exam, honestly. I mean, any licensure, master's level, whatever it is, you really want to take practice tests. You need to get used to that process. And so so that you can really think through the answers. You know, the more you do it, the more comfortable you are doing it.
Yes, some of the students that I had in my research class said that my research test questions, even though they were multiple choice, were very hard. And I think that they also show a similar structure to what you're seeing in the LBSW exam.
Yeah.
So it's good practice for those in my research class at this time. And if you're not used to taking tests and haven't been in school for a while and did a lot of paper writing instead of multiple choice, yeah, it's definitely something to get used to, trying to ferret out those wrong answers and get down to the best one.
Definitely. Well, if there aren't any other questions, oh wait, Kathleen, how often can you take the test within a given period and must you pay $75 each time? I do believe you have to pay the fee every time you take the test, yes. I'm not aware of how many times you can take it in a period of time. I'm sure that is a part of it. Let me see if I can find that on the ASWB.
I thought I saw that if you didn't pass it, you had to wait at least 3 months. You better check me on that.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's what I thought I saw.
I'm looking right now. How many people pass if I pass?
I would be curious about that.
Doesn't have that answer here. When
Oh.
will I pass? When will my 90-day wait? Oh, not when will my 90-day wait be up? Day 1 of the 90-day wait begins the day after your test date. All days, including weekends and holidays, are counted. In other words, it's not based on 90 business days, weekdays only, or et cetera. So it is a 3-month waiting period per what Dr. Wass and Dr. Boyle just said. So if you fail, then you have to wait 90 days to take the test exam again.
I didn't see anything related to how many times you could take it. I only
You
saw
can take it every 3 months until you pass it.
I only saw the wait period.
Yeah, but my recommendation would be to take as many practice tests as you can, ensuring that you're getting at least a 70 or above on that at least twice before you go to take it. And
Definitely.
if you're close to 70, I would behoove you to take it more times until you're like, you have a better threshold. You know, I think that you're spending a lot of money and time on taking this exam and you want to get it right. And there are other ways to like reach out and get more help to really ensure you're going to pass that exam too. The LEAP products boast a 90% pass rate. So, you know, my recommendation would be to connect then in with that LEAP content if on your own you're not feeling prepared enough, and even to consider if the LEAP preparation stuff, you know, would work for you. So one thing we're considering doing, if there's enough interest, is providing alumni with a webinar series in January, Zoom webinar, which is what that survey that I wanted to give all of you, just to see what people's interest is in taking a prep process. And then the fee for that prep would be like $250, and that money would go towards the setting up of a behavioral health clinic on our campus to serve the California Washington County, Fayette County communities. So we would, as faculty, whoever's involved in doing that webinar, probably a lot of Dr. Block, we'll just be doing that pro bono to support that clinic. So we're looking at that. I do want to survey interest in that, since I do think it's something that could be really helpful to alum, and I'd love for it to help support mental health services in our region.
Yeah, and I need to probably be involved, Ozzy, because I'm teaching it in 435.
I love the idea of you being involved, Dr. Wass.
Because I want my students to be able to pass when they, even if they
Yes,
to get,
100%.
yeah, yeah. They did say when the materials I was reading, they said, give yourself a cushion. Don't just think that, oh, I can make it to 70%.
Yeah, I
You want
agree.
to aim as high as possible.
Yes.
Just to cushion yourself in case you think you got the answer right, but they don't.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Any other questions for us before we? Well, I want to say thank you to all of the students who had questions, everyone for participating, for being here today, to Dr. Wass and her students, to Dr. Boyle for lending a hand, and for CJ being the background guru that he is.
We couldn't do it without you.
Couldn't do it without you. There's one more question. I think one more just added. If it could help with our MSW, I would love the webinar series. Well, Keenan, we will tell you all about it, and we will send you information. I think that's it. Other than my thank you. Any other last minute things, Dr. Boyle or Dr. Wass?
Nope, thank you.
Think about.
Thank you, everybody. And Keenan, just keep on connecting with us too. I think we make sure all your needs are met in terms of your, you moving into the MSW program, MBA, and whatever we can do to help support you in that application process. That goes for any of you students. We've just only heard from Keenan right now. So Janae, if you want to, leave DC and come back to CalU, we respect that. All right. Thank you, everyone. Really enjoyed spending time with you today, and see you all next time.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.